Hey, bet you didn't expect to be back here so soon. Me either. You've seen the thumbnail, you've seen the title, you know what we're talking about here today. But before we fully dive in, I do have to do a little bit of housekeeping. The author of The Age of Scorpius, the creator of the world of Guardian, formerly known by the pen name Audra Winter, now identifies as male, uses the name Milo, and uses he, him pronouns. So I will be referring to him as Milo for the duration of the video. If you have been keeping up on this situation and watching the recent videos, I'm probably not going to share any information with you that you haven't seen in somebody else's video. I know that sometimes my disclaimers in these parts where I'm waxing poetic a little bit about why I made certain videos can be kind of boring for some people, so I do apologize, but it's just kind of how I operate. And I honestly was really struggling to make this video. I just feel like I'm repeating myself at this point. I don't really feel much in the updates that we're going to look at really contradict anything that I've shared. I think it's a lot of Milo doubling down on points that have already been shown to not necessarily match up with what's been said previously. I just didn't really want to make a whole video of me repeating all of the points I've already made. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I simply could not summarize it quickly for you. So unfortunately, you will just have to binge about 5 hours of my content, and that'll catch you up to now. I linked the playlist. Good luck on your journey. With that, let me stop messing around. Let's get into the updates. The first update that we have ties to the Age of Scorpius Patreon. Where we had left it off, the Patreon had been paused. So our first big update is that the Patreon for the World of Guardian was unpaused, and they shared a new schedule for what they're going to be posting. Now, I talked a lot in my third video on this subject about the Patreon, and the point that I kept harping on was that there's not necessarily anything wrong with the way that Milo is running his Patreon, but I just don't think it's conducive to Milo's goal. Milo has stated that his goal with the Patreon is to rebuild trust. Essentially, he asked for a bunch of people's money for a book that wasn't necessarily in the quality to be published. So his stated reason for doing the Patreon, offer free product for a while to rebuild that trust with his audience and show that he is capable of writing stuff that people would want to purchase, so that when the new revised edition of the book comes out, he has rebuilt that trust with his audience. That is his stated reason for wanting to start the Patreon. There was a pay tier, but that pay tier got you some extra art, and it was more the vibe of if you want to pay a little extra to support Milo, you can, but you mostly would get all the content even if you didn't pay. But a bit into having the Patreon, Milo started to charge a $2 tier to get access to the full writing updates. That was when I said I just don't think that's conducive to Milo's stated goal. There's nothing wrong with paywalling your content. If you want to paywall your content, paywall your content. It just doesn't feel conducive to the goal he shared. It doesn't feel like he's going to be successful building trust, especially because he was charging that $2 tier and then they laxed on the schedule and they kept having excuses for why Milo wasn't posting. But now you're asking people for money for those posts. So people are paying, expecting to get those posts on a certain cadence. And so if you're not sharing them, now you're again falling through on a promise when you've taken people's money. And so it's exactly opposite of your goal, really. So I will give credit where credit is due, that they paused the Patreon, they stopped charging people, and then this post was them saying they were unpausing the Patreon and sharing what the new schedule will be, and sharing that they think that it's a lot more doable and that they think that they definitely are going to be able to keep up this schedule. But if people want to alter their patronage because they're getting less than they were getting before, then they completely understand. I think this is the best way they could have responded to the situation with the Patreon, pausing, recalibrating, and relaunching it with standards that they could meet. So again, I don't necessarily have a moral issue with this as much as I still just really don't think it's conducive to his goal. I don't think that he is going to rebuild trust with anybody through requiring people to pay to get those updates. I understand that he's trying to run a business. I understand that he was making a little bit of money off of this, and I understand that it makes it kind of difficult for him that he's not bringing in any money right now because he's not really selling very many pre-sales. But he's not selling those pre-sales because people don't trust him, and this Patreon was supposed to be his way to rebuild that trust. Again, you just come back to he took people's money for pre-orders, then sent out these books, and the books really weren't in a state to be published. And so people are pretty loath to give him more money because they don't trust that they're going to get a good product out of it. I would be very surprised if there were that many paying members on this Patreon. I don't know how to check that. I just think sometimes we don't get everything we want in life. Unfortunately, I understand that Milo wants to have this business. I understand that he needs to make money to maintain the business, but the odds that anyone even really is going to subscribe to the Patreon Patreon at a $2 tier are probably pretty slim. I can't imagine he's making that much money. And I actually think that in the long run, it's going to benefit his business a lot more if he just did what he originally said he was going to do with the Patreon and put out the updates for free to try and build back trust, so that when the new version of the book comes out, people trust that it's actually going to be ready for publishing because they have the evidence of that because it's all free on Patreon. Not that I think the whole book should have been free, of course not, but he said that he was going to do writing updates as well as a few free chapters here and there. To be fair, he has said the chapters will still be free. It's just the writing updates that are paywalled, but still, I think it still stands that you're not really going to build a lot of trust back with this, and so it's probably just not conducive to your goal, right? So then, if you go to the World of Guardian website, there is an essay called High Disturbance that Milo posted that's about this situation. I do highly recommend that you go read the entire essay. I think there's a lot of great information in here about forestry. If that confused you because I said it was an essay about this situation, that is a big critique that I have for this essay that a lot of other people have as well. Pardon me. This essay is pretty long, and it really is two essays meshed into one in a way that I honestly don't think ever would have been successful. We have one essay about forestry and wildfires, and then we have one personal essay about what happened to Milo. They don't mesh together really well, and I don't really think they ever would have. Many people have talked about this essay, and I've seen so many different takes, and I find them all to be fascinating, specifically because not a single one of them is that this essay comes across as genuine, unfortunately. I think I know why that is. This essay is a mesh of an educational essay about wildfires with a personal essay written by Milo about his experience with publishing The Age of Scorpius and some of the emotional growth that he feels he's experienced as a result, along with some rewriting of the narrative again. And those essays are meshed together with this connection of the wildfires being a metaphor for what Milo experienced, and him comparing himself to a tree that is stuck in a forest that is in the process of burning down. I will say that this is significantly better writing than we've seen from Milo in the past, and so I will commend that there is improvement. That being said, I think that the premise of this essay was doomed from the start, unfortunately. When you go into writing an essay, it's really important to understand what your intention with it is. Is your intention to share a personal experience? Is your intention to teach the reader something? Or is your intention both? And I have seen the both work well. I have seen people write personal essays that include a lot of facts and statistics and are attempting to teach the reader something through the author's personal experience. But in all of the examples that I could think of this being done really well, the facts and statistics were directly relevant to the personal experience that was being shared. And I will also say that in all of those circumstances, the intended purpose of the writing usually does seem to be education. It's just that the author chose to share their personal experience as a means of sharing that education and potentially also to heal a little bit of themselves as a result. I have found that if an essay tries to approach that and it feels like the author's intention was to share their experience first and educate second, then it can fall flat on its own. It's a real balancing act for an author, even when the facts and statistics being shared are relevant to the personal experience. And it can go very wrong very quickly. I have read it done well. I've read it done poorly. If you want an example of it being done well, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado is a phenomenal work. That is a memoir about Carmen Maria Machado's time in an abusive relationship where she works in a lot of facts and statistics and education about abuse in LGBTQ plus relationships. Those facts and statistics are directly relevant to the experience she was having. You see what I'm saying? Whereas in this case, we have a metaphor being used to help explain the personal experience, but then the metaphor being used is where the facts and statistics are. And that leads to a bit of a feeling of whiplash. This essay doesn't have a smooth ride through it, and it doesn't have sharp turns that feel intentional or part of the experience. It feels more like you're just slingshotting back and forth between two completely different essays that probably should have stayed separate. But I said that I thought that I knew maybe why this was landing as disingenuous. There are points in this essay where Milo actually directly explains that the reason why he included these facts and statistics is because he had sworn to himself that he always would use his platform to speak up for the things that he cared about, and one of the things that he really cares about is nature and the environment. He's a naturalist, and all of his professional experience has been in working in education as a naturalist. Right off the bat, that's a strange thing to include because across Milo's platforms, he's never done that. So Milo has had a TikTok account since 2021. And yes, he did go through a stretch of about 2 years where he only posted one video about tattoos and otherwise didn't really post. But he has a solid 2 full years at least of posting a lot of TikTok videos, of which I have watched pretty much every single one because of my original video that I made on the subject where I went through all of his TikToks. I can tell you that the sum total of times that the fact that Milo is a naturalist even comes up is so minimal in comparison to the rest of the TikToks, and at no point is it ever really about education. Right off the bat already feels a little bit like we're being told that Milo has always really felt that way and always sworn to himself that he would do that with his platforms, but we haven't really seen him do that with his platform. Why now? Why this essay? Table that. Then we get into what Milo actually recollects from the whole situation with the Age of Scorpius. And he doubles down on some things that he has shared in the past that many people, myself included, have rebutted already. So anybody who reads this essay who's really up to date on a lot of the commentary on this situation is going to understand what a lot of the common arguments against what Milo is saying are. So that piece of the essay does come across as very disingenuous because it very much feels the same as the TikTok reintroduction, where it felt like the point of that reintroduction was for him to rewrite the narrative and be able to say, let me reintroduce myself to you and tell you the story so that you watching this understand the story to be what I want the story to be, as opposed to maybe what the story actually was. I believe I've been improperly introduced to you. And this essay, the personal aspects of it feel very similar. It feels to me like Milo's intention was to rewrite the narrative and retell the story and say, this is the story of what happened to me. And so if you've been keeping up to date on this situation and you know the story, at the very least what we've seen play out in the public, then if you go and read this, then you're probably going to feel like it's like, oh, he's tripling down on these things that have already, I don't want to use the word disproven, because is there really such a thing as fact in a situation like this? But just a lot of stuff that contradicts what was already shared by Milo on TikTok. Like Milo has a habit of contradicting himself. And so maybe we don't know what the actual truth is all the time, but we do know that this isn't what was said before. So at some point, something untrue was shared. So then if part of the essay is going to feel disingenuous to the reader on its own, if they're up to date on the situation, that's going to reflect back on the rest of the essay. But then if we come back to what I was saying about Milo claiming that the reason that he included all of this in the essay is because he wanted to use his platform to speak up for something that he really cares about, when you then factor in the fact that that historically hasn't been true up to now, you start to think, what could another intention of including all of this be? And especially including the part where you directly explain why you include all of that. And you say that while I'm in the line of fire, I might as well call attention to something that I think is a good cause. Maybe it's just because Wicked is freshly on my mind because the new movie just came out, but it feels a little bit, was I really seeking good or was I just seeking attention? Did Milo include these things in this essay because he actually wanted to bring this attention to wildfires, or did he include this stuff because he wanted to project himself as somebody who is being very selfless in this moment? And even though he is on fire and he is in the midst of a giant online internet situation going on, that he's going to take the opportunity to speak up for something that's ultimately a really good cause? Is it that he actually wanted to share these facts, or does he want to project himself as somebody selfless enough to say, maybe I'm already burning, so I'll throw myself on the fire further to bring attention to a good cause and project that instead of that actually maybe being the case? And again, we don't know. We don't know what Milo's true intention with writing this essay was, and for all we know, he truly did just want to share all of these facts about forestry and wildfires. And I will say, there seems to be a lot of really good information in here. I myself am not a naturalist, so I can't necessarily verify the truth or validity of any of it myself with my own knowledge, but I do recommend that you read it and that you click through the links. We are in a climate crisis right now, and so I do recommend that everybody keeps themselves as up to date as they can on the climate situation. And then you factor in the fact that there are also large swatches of this essay where Milo describes his mental health crisis that he was experiencing and is still currently experiencing as a result of this situation. So when you take those three things together and you combine them all together, we have that we're being told that Milo wants to use his platform to speak up for the environment, but he's never really done that in the past or hasn't done that much. We have the fact that there's a lot of rewriting the narrative, and then we have the fact that there's a lot of in-depth description of severe mental health crisis, and the feeling coming out the other side of this is that it's very obvious that Milo's sole intention in writing this essay was to win people back and get sympathy. Now, we don't actually know what was in Milo's heart when he was writing this essay. There's always room that I'm misinterpreting things. One of my biggest criticisms for Milo has been his weaponization of his mental health. I've spoken about that time and time again throughout these videos, and I don't want to go too in depth about it here just because I don't want to repeat myself too much, but it's ultimately not your audience's place to support your mental health, and it's not fair of you to put that on your audience. If you are in a place where you are in a severe mental health crisis, then what you need to do is step away from the internet and get the help that you need. From the jump, it has felt very much like Milo's decision to share this information has been in an attempt to get people off of his back and to get people to stop criticizing him and to get people to leave him alone, essentially, and to win people back on his side and or make it more difficult for people to criticize him. It feels like Milo is searching for the thing that he can say to win everybody back to his side. And I have stayed on the hill that it is still, I think, believe it or not too late for Milo to win everybody back to his side, but I do think the only way for him to do that is to take full responsibility, then take a full step away from the internet and return back with an actually well-written book. And I think if he can hit the trifecta on that, I do actually think that he could salvage his public image, and I do think that eventually he could be forgiven for this craziness. Because at the end of the day, as I keep saying, the actual harm done in this situation is pretty minimal. The worst thing that he's really done is weaponize his audience towards people, and unfortunately he does that more in this essay, which we will get to. Weaponizing his audience and weaponizing his mental health as a means to weaponize that audience really is the worst thing that he's done. Publishing a bad book is not in and of itself a crime, and that's where I'm saying if he could just take full ownership, take full responsibility and say, you know what, this was all my fault, the buck stops with me, I'm the author. I put the book out in that form. That makes it exclusively my fault and nobody else's that all of this happened. My reaction also wasn't great, and that makes the backlash exclusively my fault and nobody else's. I'm going to take a step away, work on the book, and I'll come back when I have a book that's ready for publishing. And then he returned with a book that was actually very well written. I do honestly think that there would be a lot of people very open to reading the book and very open to forgiving him. I honestly can't tell you if I'd be one of those people until that day comes, if it ever does, but I do not think that there is really anything else that Milo can do to salvage his public image. And I certainly don't think that there's any way for him to perfectly word his retellings of these scenarios to gaslight us into not believing our own eyes and ears and what we watched go down. And it just feels to me like maybe Milo's never experienced this before. Maybe Milo's never actually been in a situation he wasn't able to gaslight his way out of. And so he just keeps trying to do that. And it's just not working. It's not working, and it's not going to work. That's part of why I was struggling so much to work on this video, because there just reaches a point where it's like, I don't make these videos for Milo. I'm not speaking to Milo. I'm speaking to you guys, my audience. And it's obvious to me that my work here is done. Everybody seems on the same page about the situation. And so it's kind of like, who am I talking to and talking about all of this? Because I'm not going to convince Milo, and I'm not even trying to convince Milo. And I don't really think I have to convince anybody else. I think we're all kind of on the same page. But it's just really sad. This situation has ultimately just become very, very sad to me. I genuinely wish for Milo to understand what people are saying. I wish for him to understand that people witnessed this situation and they watched it go down. And it's going to be pretty much impossible because of that for you to gaslight people. And you're probably not going to be able to retell the story in a convincing enough way that you actually change people's minds on what happened. And I just keep coming back to the fact that it's not Milo's audience's responsibility to help him maintain his mental health. If what he is saying in this essay is true about the severity of the mental health crisis that he experienced as a result of this situation, then he needs professional help and he needs to step away from the internet, and he should not return until he has addressed his mental health problems. And until then, it is not fair to put that on your audience. And it's quite frankly frightening. I got read to filth accidentally by a lovely creator by the name of Jolie Black, who I've shouted out in these videos before. In their first video on the subject, they were talking about me and my video, and they made a casual comment about how you could see in the video the emotional impact that it has on people when you put your mental health on the audience in this way. And I went back and I rewatched my video and I was like, oh my God, you watch me get agitated as the video goes. And I'll admit to you, I'll give you guys a little bit of inside baseball. The reason why I repeated myself so much in that section of the video is because I was so uncomfortable, because I really was afraid of, what if this is real? What if Milo actually is in this type of mental health crisis? And what if a bunch of people criticizing him online really does send him over the edge? I obviously don't want anything to happen to him, but at the same time, it did feel disingenuous. It did feel manipulative. And people rightfully pointed out in the comments under that video that it actually really doesn't matter if it's true or not, because it either isn't true, in which case you're just manipulating people, or it is true, in which case you're still weaponizing it to get sympathy and putting that on your audience and putting the pressure on your audience to maintain your mental health. And once Jolie framed it like that, and I saw that, my mindset on even that shifted, because I already thought it was really messed up. But then I was like, yeah, you can literally watch me get more and more agitated and frustrated and concerned trying to adequately critique this behavior without crossing the line into saying something that's going to send Milo over the edge. And that's not fair to your audience, because you put out a book for money. I purchased the book. I'm one of your paying customers. You have money in your bank account because I bought the book. Now, did I buy it to make a commentary video? Maybe, but I'm still a customer. I still bought the book and I'm allowed to critique it. If you put yourself out into the world, you are opening yourself up to critique. If that critique comes in, your response to that can't be, guys, I'm mentally ill, please stop. If you are too mentally ill to handle the criticism that sometimes comes with being in the public eye, and especially making a mistake in the public eye, then you should not be in the public eye, even if you haven't made a mistake yet. Because here's the kicker, we all do. There's no such thing as a perfect creator. And at some point, everybody is going to do something that frustrates people or irritates them. And if you are not in the mental place to be able to handle that when it happens, and to be able to handle people being mad at you, and maybe them being mad at you for something they kind of have a point on, if you're not in the mental place for that, you cannot put yourself out there on the internet as a creator, because that's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. There's no avoiding it. There's no way around it. And it's not fair to ask the audience to treat you with kid gloves just because you can't handle the critique. To be fair, Milo has never directly said, I'm doing this because I want people to criticize me less. But there reaches a point later in this essay, which I think is so telling, and I want to jump to now to further kind of make my point about sharing some of this mental health stuff. On July 28th, my peaceful morning TikTok For You page scroll was abruptly interrupted as I scrolled upon a video from another independent author. He was talking about how he'd just finished the worst indie book he'd read in a long time. As any reasonably paranoid author would, I kept watching his video. Though the other author said he wasn't saying names, he proceeded to talk about pre-order numbers that I had accomplished. I felt my heart drop with each sentence he spoke. He lectured on the importance of hiring editors and quality control in independent publishing. Horror rushed over me. He'd presented false information that my book wasn't edited as concrete fact. This is referring to who we believe is T.L. Lewis. Technically, Milo has never actually said the name of the indie author he's talking about when he says these things. In my first video, and subsequently since then, have proven that there was a lot of negative critique of the book that existed well before T.L. Lewis's video. So the critique of the book did not originate with T.L. Lewis's video. However, the way that this is phrased, I'm drawn to the line that says, though the other author said he wasn't naming names, he proceeded to talk about pre-order numbers that I had accomplished. This is, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the purest form of projection I have ever seen. Milo seems to have a habit of implying things without directly saying them. He tries to lead his audience to conclusions, but he never directly says that stuff out loud. So he always gives himself this benefit of the doubt of, oh, that's not what I meant by that. If you've been watching all of the coverage on this situation, then you've seen me give endless disclaimers, as well as basically every other creator talking about this saying, technically, Milo implied this. It seemed like Milo was saying this. Milo did this, and it felt like he was trying to lead people to this conclusion. And you always have to put that asterisk on it because he never says it directly. But here, he says that T.L. Lewis said he wasn't naming names, but gave the pre-order numbers. And because of those numbers, it was obvious enough who he was talking about. And the implication here is that Milo is saying that T.L. Lewis wanted people to figure out who he was talking about, and that he gave that information so that people would figure it out, while still giving himself the benefit of the doubt that he didn't actually say Milo's name. T.L. Lewis didn't do that, Milo. You are the one who does that. You do that all the time. Just because you do that doesn't mean other people do that. The numbers are relevant to the point that T.L. Lewis was making. Milo's book was sent to thousands of readers. We don't know exactly how many, but it's safe to assume at least 5,000 based off the ranges we've been given. So 5,000 people, all of whom found Milo via TikTok. These sales were through TikTok Shop, meaning everybody who had bought the book had a TikTok account that they bought the book through, unless they got the print-on-demand version that I did from Amazon. So if there's at least 5,000 pre-orders, that means there are at least 5,000 TikTok users who had this book. And it was in the state it was in, and it was already getting negative feedback well before T.L. Lewis made his video. And it even was getting negative feedback that it seems that Milo was responding to. I keep referencing this comment that was posted on July 11th that Milo responded to. Milo had made a video talking about narrative voice, and somebody commented on July 11th and said, this is a really funny way to deflect criticism about the book. And Milo responded, claiming that he wasn't trying to deflect criticism. T.L. Lewis's video wasn't made until July 27th. So already there was negative feedback on the book, and already that negative feedback was reaching TikTok. This situation was not sensationalized by T.L. Lewis. T.L. Lewis just happened to be the first video that went viral on this. At some point, some reader was going to make a video talking about it, and it was going to go viral, and at least 5,000 people were going to care about that video because at least 5,000 people had already bought the book through TikTok Shop and had it and maybe didn't love what they were reading. It's not T.L. Lewis's fault. And this brings us to a question that comes up all the time with commentary, which is commentary ethical, and what is the purpose of it, right? We see time and time again how people who are the subject of commentary online try to say that the commentary is the problem. And without the commentary, there would not have been a scandal. Technically, that's true, but that's the same as saying to somebody, well, if you weren't mad at me, we wouldn't be having an argument, so just don't be mad at me and it's fine. Well, no, if you did something to make me angry, then I have a right to be mad at you. You don't get to blame me for the fact that we're having an argument just because I'm mad. You don't get to blame T.L. Lewis for having commentary. I honestly think T.L. Lewis would have been well within his right to include Milo's name in the video and include the title of the book. He did not do that. That was his own choice, but he was leaving a book review online. People leave book reviews all the time online where they include the author's name in the name of the book. In fact, I would argue that's the more common way to do it. For the most part, when people post book reviews online, they say, I read blank book by blank author and here is how I felt about it, because I'm trying to tell you whether or not I think the book is worth your time. T.L. Lewis's content is more directed at indie authors, so he was using it as an educational opportunity, and because of that, he didn't want to mention the author's name because the purpose of it wasn't to steer people away from the book necessarily just because he had a bad experience with it. But coming back to the numbers, he included the numbers because it was relevant to what he was saying. He was saying, this indie author published this book maybe before it was ready. As a result, thousands of people have that book and it's not good. Like, that's what he was saying. This book is not good and thousands of people have it. He was very nice, he was very respectful, and he was framing it as advice for indie authors out there. Hey, just don't get too excited when you finish your first book. Maybe just really, really think about whether or not that's the book you want to publish, or if you want to take a step away from it, try and write something else and come back to it to make sure you still feel that way. Because in his opinion, the book book wasn't ready for publishing, and now this book is in the hands of thousands of people, and so those thousands of readers are probably going to be burned by this author and aren't likely to order another book by this author. That's good advice. He's trying to turn this into an educational opportunity for other indie authors so that they don't have the same experience that Milo had. But all Milo sees when he sees that is malice. And I can't help but feel like that's because Milo often potentially has malice behind what he's posting. And he has posted implying this about T.L. Lewis time and time again, knowing that the first time he did it, he got T.L. Lewis a ton of hate. And T.L. Lewis actually had to make a response video because one of Milo's response videos to this situation was him talking about his severe mental health in the same video as talking about an indie author who had made a commentary video and caused this whole hate wave against him. And the combination of those two things together pointed a lot of backlash at T.L. Lewis. A lot of Milo's fans were going to T.L. Lewis and saying, you caused this mental health crisis of Milo's. Again, I can't help but feel like this is such a window into Milo's mindset. And it, to me, is the most interesting part of this essay, and the part that really struck me and the part that made me really, really want to make a video about this, because he's assuming malice here. He's assuming that T.L. Lewis included those numbers because he wanted people to figure out who he was talking about. Milo is projecting so hard that he cannot conceptualize that other people don't post to the internet with deep down secret malicious intent. T.L. Lewis did not post that video because he wanted to get Milo hate. Why would he want that? For what reason would he want that? What would be the purpose? He wanted to turn it into an educational opportunity for other indie authors, and he did that. And the video is polite and it's kind. I will link it in the description if you want to go watch it. I highly recommend that you support him. I feel so bad for him in all of this. I feel like he's been done the most dirty because Milo still had a really core fan base when this happened. I have it on pretty good authority that those fans really went after T.L. Lewis after Milo posted the video where he talked about T.L. Lewis. I do not know what is in T.L. Lewis's heart. For all I know, T.L. Lewis is a malicious and horrible person who did mean malice by this. But I do not have enough evidence to believe that at this point in time. I believe that T.L. Lewis had very pure intentions in posting his video. I think he was just trying to give some advice to some indie authors. It happened to go viral. And I do also think that even if he hadn't made his video, that at some point, somebody was going to make a video about that book and it was going to go viral. I understand that that maybe was the beginning of this being a big thing on TikTok, but I think it would have become a big thing no matter what, because 5,000 people had the book. And there were negative reviews already, and there were comments on TikTok already. Milo had already allegedly made a video responding to some of the backlash, even though he claimed that wasn't the purpose of his video. Like, this was leading to become a big thing. It just happened to be T.L. Lewis's video that went viral, in my opinion. Let's talk for a second about this. Horror rushed over me. He presented false information that my book wasn't edited as a concrete fact. I rewatched T.L. Lewis's video. There are 2 places in which he mentions the editing of the book. The first time he brings it up, he says the book probably wasn't edited. The second time he brings it up, he said the book wasn't edited.
This book sold thousands of copies on pre-order. They're selling thousands more as we speak. And it is an unfinished product. It is 100% an unfinished product that was probably unedited and just shoved out to the people because people were asking to read it. And those Goodreads reviews, when I went and checked, were at like 50, which is not a lot, but had an average rating of 1.8. At 50 reviews, an average rating of 1.8, and that book is currently in the hands of thousands of people who probably have not finished the book yet. Probably in the hands of people who won't finish the book because they can tell it's not a good book, it's not a finished product, it hasn't been edited.
Is this presenting false information as though it's fact? Throughout these videos, I have died on the hill that it is a valid opinion for somebody to share in any book review, unrelated to Age of Scorpius. If you read a book and you think it needed more editing than it got, and you want to say this doesn't read like it was edited in your review, that's valid. Yes, that's not exactly how he phrased it. The first time he said it, he said probably wasn't edited, and the second time he said it, he just said it wasn't edited, right? But nobody watching this video is going to to assume that T.L. Lewis has any insider knowledge on this situation. So I don't think anybody watching this is assuming that T.L. Lewis knows whether or not the author hired an editor. Also, what does it mean for a book to be edited? If you write a rough draft and then you go through and you change one sentence, does that mean you edited the book? Maybe to you, that's what that means. The book was edited. I did edit it. I edited one thing. Milo hired editors, right? How much of the editor's feedback was implemented? We don't know. Is there an amount of the editor's feedback that had to be implemented for the manuscript to count as being edited? Does it count as the manuscript being edited just because the author hired editors and got the feedback? It's too abstract. It's too abstract to say that somebody lied, because what does it mean for a book to be edited? So if from T.L. Lewis's perspective, this book was not edited to the degree to be ready for publishing, and he just said this book wasn't edited, I do think that counts as an opinion. Now, I could be wrong about that. I'm open to being wrong about that. I'm curious to see what you guys think. But in my opinion, you can't say that somebody's lying about something if we can't agree on what the definition of a word is. Like, can you lie about somebody having edited a book if we can't agree on what it means for a book to be edited? And if the definition of that is edited to the point where it's ready for publishing, then I would actually agree with him. I do not think this was edited to the point where it would be ready for publishing. I think it needed more editing before it was going to be ready to go out into the world. So is it valid at that point to say it wasn't edited? Again, I'm open to being wrong about that, but I think that counts as an opinion. And I think it especially counts as an opinion because, again, nobody watching this TikTok is going to think that T.L. Lewis has insider knowledge on this situation and knows whether or not the author just one-shotted a draft and then put it out, or whether or not they hired or paid editors. Like, he's just sharing his opinion as a reader on the book. And the other thing I will say is, even if you don't agree with me on that, Milo has time and time again complained about how nitpicked he feels his language is. He has seemingly tried to really change narratives and spin things and change little details here and there. And when he gets called on it, he'll be like, whoa, 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 everybody's nitpicking me. And so I think it's really ironic that he's nitpicking somebody else. And the fact that T.L. Lewis didn't throw a probably in there means that he was presenting false information. What about the amount of times you've presented false information, Milo? I could go back even to the last video and the example I kept bringing up of the fact that you definitely were doing Kindle print on demand, because I got my book through print on demand and then put up a video saying instead of doing print on demand, we did this other thing, when you fully did print on demand. You presented false information there.
I spent 3 years with a literary agency that had my book in revision, and then at the 3-year mark, when I finally had it done, they dropped me. I left on my own will because I decided that I wanted to defend my idea and keep my creative freedom.
So again, you're nitpicking other people for stuff you do all the time. It's projection. That's all this is. You are projecting so hard onto T.L. Lewis. You are getting mad at him for stuff that you do almost every time you post right now. But you're playing the victim and you're saying you're the one being attacked. So there's layers to this. The first layer is it even false information? And then the second layer from that is, if it is, does Milo have a leg to stand on to call somebody else out for doing that? I don't know. That's my opinion on it. Maybe you guys think I'm being harsh, but that's how I feel about it. I'm going to read these next few paragraphs I'll write in a row, and then we'll talk about them. Within hours of his video going viral, I faced an inferno of my nightmares racing at me. I had done everything I could to put out a strong book. I started my publishing process in February by hiring 2 editors with my scholarship money. I allocated a vast majority of my startup funds to both a developmental and copy editor, then slowly increased my team of artists as the pre-orders began to take off. My developmental edits were returned to me in March before the pre-order chaos. My copy edits were returned to me in April in the heat of the pre-order chaos. During this time, I was constantly in shock, exhausted, and overwhelmed from a rapid business startup. And in the haze of implementing my copy editor's suggestions, I failed to notice that the edits themselves were insubstantial. In September 2025, Readsy, the platform I hired both my developmental editor and copy editor through, initiated an investigation on the edit passes I'd received and requested third-party feedback from editors uninvolved in the project. I ended up receiving a full refund for my copy edit pass. Both Readsy and the third-party editors agreed that the copy edits I received for the first edition of The Age of Scorpius were not up to par. My copy editor reached out to me during Readsy's evaluation, kindly apologizing and expressing her sympathy about the entire situation. But at the time of seeing the July 28th video, I didn't know that. To my understanding, I tried my hardest and done everything I could with hiring 2 experienced editors. It was too late to realize how massive of a mistake I made. Within hours, I was receiving hundreds of comments on my videos. My worst nightmare was on repeat every minute and hour of my day. It would only worsen from there. And then there's included an image of a bunch of hate comments. I just want to point out that one of these comments is from under one of my videos, which is kind of weird. Hey, Milo. Okay, let's talk about this in depth for an hour, as we do here. I had done everything I could to put out a strong book, and then describing this publishing timeline is crazy. We're going to get to the part where he talks about the copy editor, don't worry, but I just want to focus on this first paragraph. My developmental edits were returned to me in March before the pre-order chaos. My copy edits were returned to me in April in the heat of the pre-order chaos. If you've watched my other videos, you might remember that Milo shared in February that he was planning on publishing the video in, I think at first it was going to be in May, and then he ended up pushing it to June, and it did publish in the end of June. But around the same time, he was also posting about looking for an editor. Then in one of his videos had kind of had a Snapchat picture or something that had said, I didn't even procrastinate this, I started this 3 weeks ago. And I said, if he actually only spent 3 weeks implementing the edits from an editing pass, that was not nearly enough time to really digest those and implement them into the manuscript the way they needed to be. But now that we have a timeline from Milo, the developmental edits were returned in March and the copy edits were returned in April, and the book was published in June. How much time did Milo give himself with the developmental edits before he even submitted to the copy editor? Because if the copy edits were returned in April, but the developmental edits were returned in March, the maximum amount of time that could be is, I guess it depends on how long the copy editor required for time to work on it. Because if he got his developmental edits back at the beginning of March, then say the copy editor required, 3 or 4 weeks to give the feedback back, then that means that Milo only had 3 or 4 weeks to work on it before submitting it. And again, maybe the copy editor only needed a week or something, but even in that case, that's still 6 weeks with the edits. So that's not enough time to do a full edit with the developmental edits. And not only that, but then the copy edits were returned in April and the book was published in June, and he printed them and boxed them. So he had enough time to ship the manuscript to a printer, get all the books back, and then pack all of them before the end of June. But he didn't get the copy edits until the end of April. That's not enough time. That's not enough time. Ultimately, what happened here is he announced the book was going to get published before he was done with the manuscript. And maybe that's the core of the mistake. Maybe the takeaway is don't announce a release date until you're sure that's the version of the manuscript you want to publish. I think ultimately Milo just maybe doesn't realize how much time people spend with their editors and how much time it actually takes to really edit a book the way that's needed. Milo announced the release date before he sent the manuscript to the editors, and maybe was surprised to get the feedback back that he got. Maybe was expecting the editors to tell him it was pretty good and they just had minimal feedback that he could implement pretty quickly, and was potentially surprised to find out that they had more feedback than that and didn't really have enough time to implement it because he didn't give himself enough leeway for that. And the drama here, to me, is not really about the book at all. It's not a moral crime to publish a bad book, but the response has been unacceptable, and it just continues to be unacceptable because we just keep mudslinging at other people. Already in this essay, more poking at who we think is T.L. Lewis, and now the editors again. So in this paragraph that I'm wiggling my mouse around here, Milo talks about having gotten a refund from the platform Reedsy for the copy editing pass, and goes on to say that at the time of seeing the July 28th video, he didn't know that, and to his understanding, he tried his hardest and did everything I could with hiring 2 experienced editors. It was too late to realize how massive of a mistake I made, and within hours I was receiving hundreds of comments. But again, the mistake here is apparently I failed to notice that the edits themselves were insubstantial. So while this essay has the facade of taking accountability because he admits in this essay that the book was pretty bad, and he can admit now reading it that it wasn't in a publishable form, it isn't really because of this. The first thing I want to say, it is not an editor's job to fix the manuscript for you. I read the book. I'm going to get it back out. I have been very nice. I have tried my hardest to be as fair as possible. I was shocked reading this, honestly. I'd heard everybody talking about it, but I thought surely people are being dramatic. Nobody who knows anything about reading would read this and think it was ready for publishing. That could not possibly be an editor's fault. I'm sorry. Even if you had bad edits, which we'll dive into in a second, okay? I'm not trying to avoid the elephant in the room. I'm just going in order. His claim here is that the edits were insubstantial And so that was why the book was in the form it was in when it was publishing. So that's what I mean about the illusion of accountability. But still, it's like, well, the book being in that form still isn't my fault. What really is my mistake is I failed to notice that the edits themselves were insubstantial. But it's not the editor's name on the book. It's yours. And ultimately, it's your responsibility to put out a work that you want to stand by. Crispy's Tavern made a video, shout out to Crispy's Tavern, made a really, really good point about the fact that this is a self-published work, which means that there was nobody else who had to clear it. No publisher, no editors, no nothing. It's self-published, which means that you, the author, made the decision to put the book out because you decided the manuscript was ready. I understand that he's saying that his mistake was failing to notice the edits were insubstantial. That would mean that you read the book in the form it was in and thought it was fine, and that you were expecting an editor to tell you that this book needed more editing before it was published. People are not exaggerating about how poorly written this book is. Legend said that the Calexis, a mythical sword of immortality, cursed anyone it touched with immortality. You don't say. The sword of immortality curses anyone it touches with immortality? It's something I pointed out in my first video on it, which is that these are 2 pages side by side, in which the same sentence is repeated, one on each page. On one page, though midwinter raged throughout the rest of Guardian, Conviction Woods kept its humid warmth year-round. On literally the very next page, though midwinter raged throughout the rest of Guardian, Conviction Woods kept its humid warmth all year long. You needed an editor to tell you not to repeat the exact same sentence twice on 2 pages back to back? And I don't mean to be rude. You guys know I've tried to be so nice and so fair through all of this, but this is just infuriating. Here we have the main character knowing the position of activation for a secret forbidden magic for years, but never trying it. You expect me to believe that you tell a child that there's a secret forbidden uber powerful magic they're not allowed to do, and then they learn the position of activation and they've never tried it. Never tried it just to see if they have access to the super secret power they shouldn't have. I just don't find that believable. Oh, here's another one. So she was wounded. She being Rika, the main character, was wounded, and then one of her friends heals her. There's a sentence, he had no idea I'd seen my wound heal. You're laying there, you're wounded, and then your wound just closes. It's not even he had no idea that I knew he healed me. It's he had no idea I'd seen my wound heal. What does he think you think happened to your wound? I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude. What could he possibly think that you thought happened to your wound? It was there and then it wasn't. You were wounded, you were bleeding all over the floor, and then the wound just wasn't there. Methinks you knew it healed. You needed an editor to tell you that didn't make any sense. If this were a first draft, then great. This is a great first draft. But these are things that you should have noticed the second you read this through for the second time. You needed an editor to tell you that that was not good writing. That's on you. You probably should have read this manuscript in its final version and noticed that it wasn't ready for publishing. And ultimately, you're self-publishing. So you decided to put the book out and you put it out in this form, which means you're responsible for the form it's in, regardless of if you got good edits or not. But now, let's talk about the edits. In September 2025, Reedsy, the platform I hired both my developmental editor and copy editor through, initiated an investigation on the edit passes I'd received and requested third-party feedback from editors uninvolved in the project. So I'm a little bit nervous to do this because I am not a journalist. So please keep that in mind. Okay, I did reach out to Reedsy. I have a statement. I'm going to read you some things. I also did talk to the copy editor again. I'm going to tell you some stuff from there as well. I want everybody to understand that what we have here are 3 perspectives. We have Milo's perspective, which is in September 2025, Reedsy, the platform I hired both my developmental editor and copy editor through, initiated an investigation on the edit passes I'd received and requested third-party feedback from editors uninvolved in the project. I ended up receiving a full refund for my copy edit pass. Both Reedsy and the third-party editors agreed that the copy edits I received for the first edition of The Age of Scorpius were not up to par. My copy editor reached out to me during Reedsy's evaluation, kindly apologizing and expressing her sympathy about the entire situation. So that's Milo's perspective. I'm going to share with you the 2 other perspectives. Please remember, there's everybody's side of the story, and then there's the truth that's usually in the middle. I am not a journalist, so I'm just going to share with you what I was told by these people, and I'm going to leave it at that. Readsy is a platform where you can hire book professionals to help you with your work. This ranges from editors to cover art to formatting to really anything that you could need to get a book ready for publishing. You can hire people through Readsy and work with them, right? So Readsy does screen all of the people that they have on their website. So Milo hired both of his editors through Readsy and is claiming that they started an investigation in September of 2025 into these edit passes. I asked Readsy, did you initiate it of your own accord or was it requested? Readsy says, yes, it happened in September of this year at the request of the author. They also clarified that typically things have to be reported within 14 days of the applicable incident, but that they reserve the right to still investigate stuff after the fact if they decide to. And in this case, the author reported both collaborations with one editor for developmental editing and with another for copy editing several months after they were finished. However, considering the repercussions, we decided to officially review the collaborations anyway. They did in fact investigate both editors, but both of those were due to the fact that the author reported them. So the way this sentence is phrased leaves that out. Technically, we don't know what's in Milo's heart. We don't know if that was intentionally manipulative, but it does kind of feel like he's trying to lead people to believe that the platform just of their own accord saw this going down and decided to investigate the editors. According to the platform, Milo reported these editing passes and wanted them looked at and wanted a refund. When I asked what the result of the investigation was, they said that neither Readsy nor the third-party editors found any faults with the developmental edit work. To the contrary, the work was praised by all third-party editors who looked at it and confirmed what the developmental editor had told me when I reached out to her for my last video, which was that the editor did tell Milo that the manuscript was not ready for publishing and needed a lot more editing. Bear in mind, Milo has said stuff publicly that contradicts that. Milo has claimed at points that both the editors signed off on this manuscript and said it was ready for publishing. Then they started to talk about the copy editor. Here's what they said. While the copy editor did a lot of work on the manuscript, there were still a high number of missed errors and inconsistencies, for example, with capitalization after the pass. This was also reflected in the feedback from our independent editors who highlighted additional overlooked punctuation and grammatical issues. Our assessment overall was that the manuscript needed a second developmental edit with focus on inline edits or at least a very heavy copy edit, while the work from the copy editor was more of a very heavy proofread. Additionally, the author had mentioned to the editor early on that their intention was to have a publishing ready manuscript after this copy editing pass. Given that context, we believe it would have been important to inform the author that the manuscript was not publication ready after the copy edit. Authors place a great deal of trust in Readsy professionals, and part of that responsibility is ensuring they are fully aware of the state of their manuscript before proceeding to publish. So there's a lot there, and I wanted to read you the whole thing because, again, I'm not a journalist, right? So I think it's just important for me to share with you exactly what they told me. When I read this, what I see is them saying this copy editor did a lot of work on this manuscript, but it was more of a proofread than a copy edit, and the work obviously needed a lot more than that before it was going to be ready for publishing, and it does not seem like the copy editor told Milo that when Milo had expressed that he wanted a publication-ready manuscript. So that's what the platform said. When I spoke to the copy editor, she told me that basically the second she found out that Milo was unhappy with her work, she was happy to provide a refund. And that is corroborated by the platform inadvertently. I hadn't even asked them about that because I reached out to them at the same time. But the platform said, as a result, we decided that there were grounds for a refund for the copy editing collaboration. That said, as we reached out to the copy editor about this, they offered to refund the author in full themselves. I have always worked on the basis that if an author tells me they are unhappy with my work, I'd be happy to offer a refund in full. As a result, the author did receive a full refund for the copy editing collaboration, and for that one only. So again, when I spoke to the copy editor, she said that the second she found out that Milo wanted a refund, she offered it because that's her policy. If anybody's unhappy with her work, she's happy to provide it. She also did say that the feedback that she got from the website deemed the edits given were all correct, but that Milo's manuscript required more extensive edits as well. Upon reflection, I also agree with their assessment. All of that to say that the platform did decide to refund Milo. So even though the editor offered the refund and was happy to give the refund, the platform did the investigation anyway and did find that a refund was deserved. And I've given you all three perspectives on that, and you can form your own conclusion on that whole situation. I want to come back to my point that it doesn't matter. It's not the copy editor's fault that the book was in the form it was in. You, the author, should have realized it wasn't ready for publishing. We're not talking about missing randomly that a character has blue eyes on one page and green eyes 300 pages later. That is maybe something to get mad at a copy editor for missing. That's not the problem this book had. If you want to be an author, you need to be able to recognize what is wrong with your own work, and you need to be able to read it back and understand what needs work. This was not a publication-ready manuscript, and everybody's in agreement on that. And even the platform, part of why they were saying they thought a refund should be provided was because they didn't feel like it was a publication-ready manuscript, and they thought the editor should have told Milo that. And it's just exhausting and really disappointing. And I know that that sounds weird because I don't know why I expected any different, but I just don't really understand how Milo doesn't understand that a zillion editors could have looked at this book and not recognized the problems with it. You should have looked at the book and recognized the problems with it. You published the book in the state it was in. That's nobody's fault but your own. Your mistake was not realizing that the copy edits weren't sufficient. Your mistake was not reading back your own manuscript and recognizing the problems with it and working on it itself. And in the state it's in, if you expect an editor to fix that on their own, then what you want is a co-author, not an editor. And I've been saying that. I'd been saying that before we found out that a refund was provided. In the state it's in, this book needs so much more than just another editor. This book needs significantly more love and care and attention from the author themselves. I don't know, it's just frustrating. What he goes on to describe in the essay is the feeling like no matter what he said or how he presented himself, that there was no way to get this hate train off of his back. Nothing I could say was the right thing to say, right? Here's the thing though, from the jump, my stance has been that if Milo was just honest, that he realized that the book was not ready for publishing and had taken a step away, that it would never have become that big a deal. And he easily could have returned to the internet with a better written book and people would have forgiven him and it would not have been really that big a deal at all. I mean, it probably would still have been a big deal a little bit because again, 5,000 people had the book, but it never would have reached this point. Consider the fact that maybe the reason why you feel like nothing you can say is the right thing to say is because you keep trying to figure out what to say to get people not to be mad at you anymore. But none of that involves taking any real accountability for your role in this situation. And in fact, every time you speak on this situation now, you just keep mudslinging at other people. And when people say stop blaming other people, you just keep tripling down. And then it's a bunch about mental health and stuff too. I just think it's not appropriate. It's not your audience's responsibility to care for your mental health, right? But I want to dive into the comments on the Patreon under this. There's been some responses from the World of Guardian team. So this is in response to a comment that has been removed. The intention isn't to blame specific people or to shift blame. It's Milo's perspective of events. Please don't share names or send hate. That said, thank you and I share your fear, Solly. So presumably the reason the comment was removed because there was maybe a name shared. Again, they're saying the intention isn't to blame specific people or to shift blame. It's Milo's perspective of events. But if your perspective is this isn't my fault, it's somebody else's fault, then your perspective is still trying to shift blame, right? Like you could be sharing your perspective of events and still trying to shift blame. And it's clear that Milo still very much feels like the backlash is T.L. Lewis's fault and the state the manuscript was in was the copy editor's fault. And neither of those things are true, in my opinion. Somewhere in a comment, somebody asked, one thing I'm curious about though, you mentioned the copy edits being subpar. Was it the same for the developmental edits? And the response was, dev editor did a good job. It's become clear that the manuscript needed more than one round of dev edits though, and that was all the first editor was contracted for. And that's from Elrose. That's one of the members of the team. So is Solly. I don't know if I explained that before when I read that. Except Milo has tried time and time again to mudsling at the dev editor along with the copy editor. So this just feels so disingenuous now. There's no even acknowledgement of that here. Just off the top of my head, not even going back and looking at some of the other stuff I've said, I remember that Milo put their names on the Goodreads, right, and added them to the byline. He put something on the Patreon with the developmental edits and then the copy edits and then the new editor all side by side. He put out that Q&A that was allegedly written by the new editor where they were openly saying that the developmental editor did not do a good enough job and there was stuff they missed and all this stuff. I'll put it on the screen. And then Milo requested a refund for that editing pass, only to be told by the platform, no, sorry, that editor did a phenomenal job, actually. Kudos to them. To which now you're just saying, nope, the dev editor did a good job. It's become clear that the manuscript needed more than one round of dev edits. No apology, no public acknowledgement of the fact that you slung all that mud at the dev editor. Allegedly, you were checked by the website and the website told you, no, that editing pass was good. And now you're just saying, no, the dev editor did a good job. Zero acknowledgement of the fact that you ever claimed otherwise. No apology, no, hey, we were wrong, no nothing. Again, there's just no actual accountability here. You have been tearing into that dev editor. I would argue more than the copy editor, only to be, again, allegedly told by the platform that that editing pass was great and you're not getting a refund because you got what you paid for and that editor did a good job. And instead of saying, hey, sorry, we said all that about the editor, buried in the comments here is you saying to somebody who asked, yep, the dev editor did a good job. It's become clear that it needed more than one round of dev edits. Okay, well, I wish that had become clear to you before you had insulted this person so much and tried to put their name out into the world so people would know exactly who you were talking about. And it was only when you couldn't get the proof that a bad job was done that you finally were like, okay, fine, the developmental editor did a good job. It's just that it needed more than one round. Oh, here's a response from Milo themselves. Thank you for your support and the kind words. I really appreciate your willingness to stick around and hear me out. My intention was never to blame any specific individual other than myself. I published a bad book and that's my fault. My aim was to retell my experience of the first time I saw viral misinformation about myself in the hours following, where I faced a sudden onset of hundreds of hate comments. Oh my God. And again, it just feels like even on Milo's Patreon, where most of the people subscribed are presumably big enough fans of his to be subscribed and read what he's writing and engage with it, multiple of them are telling him that it reads like he's shifting blame and trying to blame other people. And the response to that is, I'm not trying to shift blame. I'm just sharing my perspective. This is just my perspective. And in this comment, he does say, I published a bad book and that's my fault, but then goes on to say, my aim was to retell my experience of the first time I saw viral misinformation about myself. But was there misinformation? It's just very clear to me that Milo doesn't get it. And at this point, he's probably never going to get it. Because if even his dedicated fans are trying to tell him, you're clearly trying to shift blame and it's not going to work, please stop. And he's still tripling, quadrupling down and trying to shift around. Like, I just don't think there is a point where Milo's going to understand. And I also honestly think at this point that he's trying to maybe continue the commentary about him. I don't know this for sure. I don't know if it's just because he got the refund from Reedsy that that's the information that he wanted to share and that's why he wrote this essay, but I want to stop engaging in this situation because I'm wondering if the attention from all the commentary is some of what he's seeking now. And I don't know that for sure, but that just is my feeling looking at some of this. I reserve the right to change my mind, but if there are more updates on the situation and you don't see videos from me, I probably just decided not to cover it because I don't really want to engage with this anymore. And I honestly just feel very sad. And I hope that someday Milo understands why the entire world views the situation the way we do, different to him. And that's potentially because some accountability needs to be taken that hasn't been taken yet. That's going to be all for me today, you guys. As always, I want to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section down below. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!